adjustment here, I apologize.
Take your time, Hartley.
No problem with the video. I hope it speaks now. Okay, go right ahead.
You all set, Hartley?
Yes, all set. Go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome to the March 23rd, 2018 Selectmen's Chambers Town Hall meeting at 272 Main Street. I apologize, folks, that we're starting a little late at 6:20. I had originally been scheduled to arrive late, but Cindy King took sick, so me and Sue Lizio will be taking up the task of the town's business here. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and have a roll call, please.
Sue Lizio, present.
Gordon Clark, present. Could you please join me on the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm announcing at this time that the meeting's being tape recorded on local access TV. Is there anyone else recording today? Okay, it's just, that's fine. You're able to record. You just need to announce to the chairman that you are. Chairman's additions or deletions? Okay, I have none. We're going to go right into, this is a work session. Votes may be taken. 2.1, FY19 budget discussion review. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kryler at this time to start us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You each have a copy of the draft budget book. Emphasis on the watermark that says draft. It's not real until you've approved it. This has been being built over the last couple of months. You've seen earlier iterations of the spreadsheets that make up the back half and earlier iterations of the narrative and the charts that make up the front half. I did present this out at the Finance Committee last evening, and they took it up. They'll be taking it up additionally again next week. The hope is that when the Board of Selectmen meets next Tuesday, you'll have your calendars and be able to schedule the joint meeting with the Finance Committee, which is called for pursuant to the budget policy that you have, likely for the week after Easter.
So that's called the public hearing, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So with that, you've each had the chance to go through and read the opening letter, so I won't spend any time on that. But moving through the book, just very briefly, the base of this is what we used last year, but it's been expanded upon. I had a request to have more graphics for people that are able to see things and appreciate things graphically instead of in the narrative. So you'll see there are all of the sections that tie into the budget appear in narrative up front. So you have the description of the worksheets on page 10. That lays out what each of the actual underlying spreadsheets that make up the 5-year budget revenue and expense forecast document. You have the summary sheet that'll show 5 years and whether we're in balance or not. Generally, what you'll see, if we've done it correctly, is the year that we're talking about, we're in balance. And out years, we are generally going to be showing as being out of balance. And that's because we're working on very conservative revenue estimates, and we know that the expenditures are being estimated higher. To point, we started...
I like that.
Yeah, good. To point, we started this year at about $500,000. You'll remember was the amount that it appeared we'd be out. But once we started getting the data populated with actuals, we've been able to come into better focus. So you'll see the summary sheet, revenue projection sheet, growth, which is the sheet that looks at the ability of the town to raise revenue through real estate property taxation. We take last year's amount that we were able to raise, we carry it forward to the next year. It is our beginning point. You then are able to add 2.5%. You're then able to add for any new growth that has occurred over the prior year. So if there's been a new building that's gone up, or if people have put in a deck or a pool or anything that's has taxable value, and then you add those together, and that gives you your levy limit before you consider what you've approved outside of the levy limit, which would be your Prop 2.5, either overrides or debt exclusions. So All of that data appears in the revenue projections and growth charts. You then have the expenditure projection sheets, and those show by functional segment, so by municipal government, by public safety, by debt, by insurance, by education, what our expenditures are projected to be for this year and for the 4 out years. The COLA and wages is, it's basically a guide tool. It allows you to simulate what a certain COLA or wage adjustment would mean on the overall budget. Then you'll have a benefit chart that shows everything from retirement to health
Where is
insurance.
that, Jim?
Benefits is going to be,
The page?
do you want the chart, or do you looking for the narrative?
The charts, please.
Yeah, the chart is going to be, I'll go to the index. Benefits, did somebody say it back there?
Expenses, education. Oh, I got it.
26, yeah.
Thank you.
And the last of the charts are going to be debt and debt detail, and then enterprise funds, for which we have one, the Water Enterprise Fund. So, for those that are in the audience or those watching at home, this document is up on the town website, so it's right on the home page. So you're able to go to the website, click on it, and make your way through it. The front half, the narrative with the graphs, is about 34 pages, and then the back half is about another 30 or 35 pages of the spreadsheets that are everything that underpins the narrative up front. So given that, if you fast forward yourselves to page 34. '34 is the omnibus or consolidated annual budget. So this is the DOR recommended format and the best practices from the Collins Institute format. We had a lot of discussion about this last year, that people felt that this was not enough information in order to be able to actively participate in the budget discussion at town meeting. So the expectation is that we will still be working off of this, because that's the way it's reported to the state. But if you go and you flip to page 42, at the end of the omnibus, people have access to see the actual line-by-line, line-item breakout of each department. So the omnibus will just have a department, a salary and an expense line, and a total. Next department, salary, expense, total. This shows everything down to office supplies and gasoline.
How are we going to do this? Are we going to be as formal as we usually are, or can we just have conversation?
Oh, I think this is a work session, so just conversation, yeah.
Can I just ask one thing, Sue? Absolutely, I'm for formal, but Jim, do you need to go through the whole thing? And then
No, anytime.
I'm just
prefer-
asking,
yeah, I
so
prefer to
whatever
catch
is
them as
most
the questions
functional,
come.
all right? You have 30 years' experience of this, and Sue has at the school department 20 years and 7 years as a selectman.
Oh, God, 20, no, I didn't,
Was
oh,
I
I wasn't
wrong?
there that long.
Well, you said to one time that you had town council or something for 20 years. I'm wrong. Well, how many years did you, I want to get credit for how many years did you have at the school department?
I don't remember, I tried
Oh,
not.
well, you want me to get the correct date, you don't remember.
Well, you can say 20 if you
All right.
want to, but it
How
adds a
about-
lot of years to my life.
How about this? We'll give you close to 3 decades of public service, all right? So, anyway,
Okay.
at this point, I guess we'll go with the flow, as long as we get the information out there.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I think what we used to do, even though people saw the line items, it was voted on at the end of each department.
Yeah.
So it was similar to the way that
The omnibus, yeah.
this is. But that was what was voted. And it just, there are lots of folks who said it was easier because they would just look down at that, but then at the same time, they could see what it was comprised
Yeah,
of.
my expectation will be we'll have, not likely the entirety of this book printed for that night, but we'll have the omnibus and the detailed breakout. So when people walk in, if they prefer to look at the omnibus version, which is just revenue, salary and expense, or they want the more blown-out one, it's their choice, but we'll have both that night.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thanks.
All right. I'm going to have you come backwards just a little bit, just to frame where we are. Actually, no, we'll go the other way. Go to page 57. 57 is going to show you the 5-year revenue and expenditure summary. So if you look at fiscal 19, you'll see that these documents contemplate revenue in total of $23,269,431. And the expense at the bottom of the page, when you take into consideration municipal services, education, employee benefits, debt service, and miscellaneous expenses, and then the Water Department Enterprise Fund, in addition to other miscellaneous expenses, you'll see that it balances out, again, at $23,269,431.
No change?
I intentionally dragged the decimal point in so we don't get that. Everything rounds up.
Thank you.
So I don't know if it's your pleasure to go budget by budget. If you get back to page 42 again, we can work budget by budget. If anything grabs your attention you want to talk about, the far right-hand column on the expanded, blown-out version of the budget are where notes are. If there's anything of particular interest or something that changed, there'll be a note in the margin.
I don't know how you want to do it, but I'm looking, it's not the first time I've looked at it either. I mean, I think we can skip over anything that says contractual because
Sure.
it's contractual. But the other ones,
Yeah, I'll take those up.
if you could
So
just
the second
highlight
one.
those.
Yes,
Mr. Crowder, just 1 second here, please, because I'm trying to follow both of you, right?
Yep, you're-
Yep, is that every time we do it, just say the page numbers so that...
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep, we're on
thank you.
42.
Thank you.
So in the first budget, which is the Board of Selectmen budget, the first note of something that is being proposed to be different is the pending reclassification to a T5 in the comp and class plan for the position of executive assistant. In 2015, about 9 months before I came, the Select Board contracted with HRS Consulting to come in and do a reevaluation of what had been a 2012 comp and class plan, and there were a number of positions that they recommended be reclassified. It wasn't a recommendation that their job duties be changed or additional tasks be added, but just looking at what the market had done since the 2012 version, that they really should be reclassified. Of the list of positions, there are only 2 remaining today that are non-union. So in this document, you will see the executive assistant position that has that flag, and the conservation agent will also have that flag. They are the 2 positions that were recommended to be changed that are able to be changed if it's the wish of the Board of Selectmen and ultimately town meeting.
I thought I had asked for some backup on that, but
I sent you an email with the list of the positions that HRS had recommended, and I'd actually highlighted the ones that are currently in union.
No, I meant, what did they have to say about it? Did they simply come back and say it needs a different,
They did a whole report.
Great.
I had presumed I presume you had it actually because it was
No.
during your prior incarnation, so.
not saying that those should have been reclassed, no.
Okay.
If-
Yeah,
if
there's a whole report they did in, I want to say it was March of 15. I can email that to you tonight.
That would be great, thank you.
And the next line is also different from last year and has a note next to it. There's a proposal to reinstitute what had been at one point a 20-hour HR position. The position was a victim of budget cuts when things got tight in the early 2000s. It looks like, based on prior budget reports, the position was done away with. We currently have some of the HR function being performed upstairs here in the Selectman's and Administrator's office, and another portion being done downstairs in the Treasurer Collector's office. The idea would be for something, the place you can get yourself in most trouble is HR. So to have somebody that is specifically here doing nothing but HR. I know Barb's in the audience, the collector treasurer. She had something just come across her desk today. You want to speak to that for a quick second?
Well, with the Affordable Care Act
Yeah.
upon us, I just received a notice today informing us that as of April of 2018, depending on our quarter, when we file quarterly for our payroll, if we have any employees who are receiving insurance out on the exchange or through Mass Health, we can be subject to up to $750 per employee that we have to pay each quarter.
So the point is,
I
there are
was
little things like
totally
that.
unaware of this.
Right, there are things like that pop up, that if there was a dedicated HR person,
We would have known about it ahead of time.
it wouldn't be where we are now. So that's just one example that just happened today that I wanted to bring
I
up.
did know that there was eventually going to be some sort of implementation of a fee, just from general research that I've done on ACA, because I do the payroll end of the Affordable Care Act. But to keep up on knowing when exactly all this is coming to fruition, it's kind of more like a find out when we finally get.
The other piece that it should be concerning is that we don't have a centralized personnel file. We have some personnel files here in the Selectman's office, and we've recently begun recalling personnel files that have been kept out in other parts of the organization. Legally, we have a responsibility to have a secure copy of the personnel files, and nothing is to go into it unless it has a lawful purpose, and only if the employee's been notified that something's been put in. So if it's scattered here and there, we don't have any ability to control that, which is also a concern.
May I?
Absolutely.
I had asked you thank you for sending me the job description. I was a little bit concerned when I read it because it was from back in 2001, which I would say probably needs a revamp.
Sure.
I was also concerned because it's called an HR position, but it really is not an HR position. It's a clerical position. The responsibilities of that position look to be related to personnel kinds of things, but the way that it was written, in my opinion, is you could have two people and simply sort out the work and say, here, you do the HR stuff and you do this, and you'd be able to switch them without too much problem, because they're both clerical positions. So if the problem is we need an HR department, then I have one opinion, but if the problem is we need some clerical help, then I have another position on it. If you're telling me we need clerical help, and I'm looking at both of you because I don't know quite where this is coming from, okay?
I can tell you, I'm not looking for clerical help. I'm looking for someone that can
concentrate on doing that.
specialize in HR and be responsible for HR.
And when I looked at that job description, it's nothing more than a clerical.
Well, it's
job.
interesting, you're right. There are two job descriptions that they predate HRS coming into town. It was back when Mark Morse's MMA Consulting Group did a comp and class back in the 80s, and then revised it in the 90s. And there was a personnel coordinator, which is really what this position is.
Yeah, we had a personnel board a long time ago, too.
And then there was a personnel director, which is far more responsible of a position. It's also not likely you're going to fund it at 20 hours at that rate. So this is kind of the soft way in to beginning to formalize personnel processes.
Myself, I would prefer that if we really want to move to something called HR, and an HR specialist is what I would call that person, that it would require somebody with an HR background. And it should also, I think, report to someone who has a true HR background, some kind of an HR manager. And I see that as something that's going to need a little bit of work maybe on your part to be able to say, what would this organization look like and how much work would have to be done do I start with an HR manager who's also a working manager, which lots of managers are today? So to me, it's putting the cart before the horse, because I don't think there's been enough discussion about the need for HR expertise in the town. If you want to have that discussion between now and the fall, I would be totally willing to entertain the discussion. But right now, I just to fill it, because we have a need for somebody to do some filing and sorting and record keeping is just not.
And I want to be clear, so that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying we need clerical help. I'm not saying we need somebody to do filing and sorting. I'm saying we need to begin, which is what this is meant to be, to begin to have a centralized personnel function. Is it ever going to be a personnel manager and a personnel assistant and we're not big enough for that. But we need somebody that will have as their sole responsibility keeping track of this stuff and making certain we don't get in trouble. Right now.
And who would this person report to?
Well, right now, it's budgeted in the Selectman's office, so it would report to me. I'm probably the closest thing you've got in Town Hall.
Well, you
with
win
all-
the
with all-
prize.
With all due respect to Barb.
You win the prize
to
by
be-
default.
Well, no, by design. It's what I've chosen to do
Yeah.
over the course of my career.
But somehow it's not, it's like all of a sudden to me,
Yeah.
all of a sudden it shows up in the budget, yet there had been no discussion with us about it before.
And
And that's
a great
what I-
segue. It's a great segue for me, because it has been an ongoing discussion at the staff level. And this is, I mean, here we are at the end of March. We started this in December. It's been on the docket since December. And I have attempted to engage anybody who would be willing to discuss the budget with me. And this is the first time we've actually had an opportunity to meaningfully discuss line by line. So while I can appreciate it's new to you this evening, because we're discussing it for the first time, it's not new to those of us that have
Well, I think the
been.
first time I saw it with that note in it was just maybe a few weeks ago.
Well, that might be the first time you saw it. It's
Yeah.
not the first time you've had it.
Anyway,
But I do
I
understand.
have to
your-
bring, I just need to bring something else up, because there's another piece to this too. And it relates to record keeping and whatnot. And that's our IT needs and our IT plan. And I know it's another budget piece, but it's related to this in the sense of, if you don't have good systems, I don't care how many people you throw at it, it's not going to fix things for you.
Correct.
And I think our report on, the IT assessment said that pretty well. And I know we've applied, and Jim, you and I have talked about it, but for the benefit of those who haven't heard that conversation, my concern is, even though we've applied for a grant, we don't know for sure that we're going to get it. And we don't know for sure, especially where IT things are concerned, if it's going to be able to be enough money.
Right.
So I'm looking at this very lean budget that we have right now, and I'm not saying that you don't have a need that should be talked about and discussed for HR, but you gotta have the systems in place, you've gotta have the security in place, you've got to do that. And I'm concerned, if that grant doesn't come through, we're gonna be stuck another whole year being able to do that plan. And I don't think we can afford to do that from a community perspective, from running the town. So I would like to see us find some money, be it here or somewhere else, where we can take some money and put it aside in case that grant doesn't come in, or in case it doesn't cover everything that needs to be covered. I'd like to leave some money in raise and appropriate for the fall in case we need it for that. That is, without a doubt, my priority right now.
Well, if I'm tracking with you, that if the grant doesn't come through to do the infrastructure that we need, that's a $200,000 grant. So your wish is that we go into this budget, carve out $200,000 to leave on the table as raise and appropriate?
I'm saying we should carve out whatever we can that is not as much of a priority as that is to put aside. Even if we get the grant and it ends up being 220,000 that we need,
Right.
and we have to cough up another 20. I'm looking at this as, there's my 20.
Yeah. And for those that are following, Sue and I had this conversation already, so we're, to a degree, we're play acting, not really. But,
No, we're
but
just
we've had
repeating
this.
the
I knew she was going to
conversation.
say this, and she gave me the benefit of knowing in advance so I could prepare myself to argue back a little bit. So
I said, listen,
appreciate
I'm
it.
just going to tell you, I'm bringing this up, okay?
I appreciate if things need to be cut, new things are obviously the
I just want you to
first
know
things be
my
cut.
feeling on it, okay?
I got you.
I mean, you've got to look at the whole thing too, but are we taking questions from FinCom?
No, we're not at this time. If I could just take a second, because I'm losing track here. Just on, my comment would be on the human resource part-time position, Mr. Crowther.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Sometimes we have to remind ourselves, and myself, these are my thoughts, that this isn't 1968, it's 2018. And so now there are laws, federal, state, that are mandated that relate to human resources. Whether it's how we keep records, it's how we treat our employees, whether it's that we're in compliance with federal and state law in regards to civil rights, to gender equality, and many, many, many other issues. It's actually unbelievable in 2018 that we don't have any resources going on. It's unacceptable, and there might be debate about whether we need a full-time human resource, but if you look at the budget, you've been spending a month, Mr. Crowley, to get a $500,000 deficit. We don't have the money. So for $21,245, it's a start. Before, we've always kicked things down the road. I say, come back next year if you want full-time, but you better come back for $100,000 or more if you want a really high quality, because you people out there, do any of you have a company that's more than 20 people don't have human resources? I know there's no government agencies out there that don't have human resources. So it's not the perfect answer, Sue, but for $21,245, we might be able to say that just not by paying fines for, lack of word, the Affordable Act or something. It's time. This is not 1968. Right? It's a start. It's not perfect, but I commend Mr. Crowley to it. And I do have a problem, to tell you the truth, but you have to live in the real world that we only have so many dollars. I actually have a problem that's not full-time and maybe with a part-time with it, to be honest with you. But you gotta live in reality. We balance books now. We know where our money is. And so that's all I have to say that. On the other thing, if you could explain, because you're much better at it, about seeking grants, could you explain that it's just not an arbitrary grant, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Crowley, you're much better at this than me. We are running for this grant because over the last 3 years, we got ahead of 340-some towns, there's 351 towns. We are ahead of 340-some towns because we were one of the first ones to have the lieutenant governor here to bring in all kinds of money for you. We'd be in more trouble now if we didn't have that. And because we're on the head of the community compact, we actually have a fantastic chance of bringing another 200,000 in there. So we're doing kicking every stone, not we, well, yeah, everybody here, all the people working hard to find money. As Sue says, we gotta find money. Well, we're doing everything in our power here, so I support this 100%, and I think we're negligent. It's not perfect, Sue, I agree with you, but money don't come from trees, and so that's all my thing here.
And I agree with you philosophically. My concern is, I looked at that job description, and it is not nearly as robust as it needs to be.
Well, I think
It is simply not.
And maybe
For
that's-
what I'm
I agree with
hearing you describe,
That's
and what
You're right.
you're describing, it's a clerical position.
I'm
and
not
that's
describing,
it.
I haven't described
Well,
anything.
no, you're describing
This is the
what,
first I've ever had to talk about this, so I'm not describing anything. What I'm describing is a need to be compliant
I
in 2018.
understand. But you're
So-
talking about somebody with some expertise in it.
Well, we just got to a balanced budget, $21,225. You're not gonna get an intern who's thinking about becoming human resources for $21,245. Let's start somewhere to hold it together so that we're compliant with federal, state mandated laws, that we are doing the right thing for civil rights, gender equality, that's a big thing. All right, let's have a start, it's a seed. If you want next year, maybe we can apply for some more grants to do that, but it's a seat, and then we'll be compliant with our healthcare. You know, we're so far ahead. If you look here, I'll go back to it later, I put number 26 here about insurance. I don't think out of 351 towns, there's any towns that went down $200,000 in insurance this year. Matter of fact, I think we should get a little prize, because everyone else, I hear from the governor's doing a great job, but they're at 15%. What's the insurance increase down the school they were asking for?
11.1.
Asking for 11%. We had a $200,000 cut, folks. That's all-star performance by everybody. So, you know, you only have so much things. I think we need to start somewhere. And so that's a valid point. Yes, I love
to
this.
train the person. That's my point, Gordy, okay? If you're gonna hire somebody for a clerical position at this kind of
I didn't say it was
pay-
clerical. Mr. Kryler's the one who's talked to him about that. Because I haven't said anything about clerical. I want, even if it's a
It's a
start.
clerical position. There is nothing required in that job description for HR background at all.
Well, for
HR
$21,000
education or anything.
For $21,245, you're not gonna get anybody.
And that's my point. Why hire
Well,
somebody?
do you have a place to get $100,000 to hire someone?
Can I, something I'm realizing that there's a part of this discussion that I wasn't following. You asked me if I could show you that the position existed previously in town.
Yeah, and I got it.
And what I did is, I went back and looked, and I found the old job description
Mm-hmm.
and sent it to you. I'm now realizing that you think I sent you that as what I'm going to be working off of.
Well, yeah, because you said it was to reinstitute that job description.
But there were two. That's the one that was most recently filled.
I didn't see another one.
I gave you the one that was most recently filled. That's what you had asked. When was it last here?
Yeah, in 2001 it was.
Yeah. So my point is, the job description that you're looking at, I didn't hand you that or email that to you as the example of what the expectation is of this new person. I was answering a different question, which was, when did you last have it, and can you prove it to me?
What was?
Oh, no, what
You're
I...
saying what was, and you have a different
But
perspective
the
of what will be.
reason that I was asking for it was if a job description needs to be changed or rewritten, a new job description needs to be rewritten, then it has to go through the whole process to go on the matrix too.
Absolutely.
Okay? So that's why I was asking, are you talking about an existing job description that is able to be filled as it is? And if it's not, then it has to go through another process, and we don't have time for that right
And
now.
in fairness, you've never said that to me.
No, but that's what I was thinking all along.
But I can't read your mind, Sue.
No, I'm not saying that you should have, but what I'm getting at is, if that is the job, it's clerical, you know?
That's fair. I think
Bring
that
me
is-
something,
that is a
bring me
very-
something more robust.
That's a very fair statement. That job description does look more clerical than the position that was above it.
I mean, bring me something that's more robust, more on the side that Gordy's talking about.
I'm
And-
talking
and-
about long-term goals, not today.
I got you. I hear you.
But you don't just fill it with a body, is my point. A body isn't necessarily gonna be able to do what you want it to do,
That's fair.
okay? That's my point.
Okay.
Anyway, that's a lot for a $20,000 position, but
21,245.
I know.
We are now,
No sense, though, I like that, no sense.
we're 4 lines deep in the budget.
Yeah, well,
If you get to the accountant, which is going to be 2/3 of the way down that same page, that'll be your next note. It says increase from 37.5 to 40 hours, plus post-probationary adjustment. When the town accountant was hired, as was the case with the treasurer collector, we brought them in low and wanted to see if they could prove their value before considering an adjustment that brought them more into scale with what the real market is. I think we've been blessed with the 2 people that we have. I think that their performance has shown that. So part of this line is to do that post-probationary adjustment. But the other is, I think it goes to the same point we had in our discussion with the library. There's no doubt in my mind that our town accountant is here more than 40 hours a week and is only getting paid 37.5. We have both a legal and a moral obligation to not allow that. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, obviously, if we suffer, if we make them, or if we permit allow it, we're in violation. So for a number of reasons, whether it's the legalistic or the fact that it's just the right thing to do, that's why that is being proposed.
So is that an hourly position?
It is not. I mean,
It's a salary
Yeah.
position.
yeah, and the salary had been predicated on 37 and a half hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
And our,
Hey, you gotta stop 1 second?
Yeah.
I'd like to just say I'm fine with that too, so we have agreement, all right? Thank you.
there you go. Next note you'll see is the increase in the annual audit because we're doing the OPEB evaluation, which although, for those
Can you
following at home.
explain what that is?
Yeah, I was going to say, for those at home, OPEB is other post-employment benefits. If you follow other cities and towns or generally anything in the news about local government, you'll realize that communities have an unfunded liability when they offer retiree health insurance, particularly. What the government above us in the food chain has said is, if you know you have X number of employees and they're going to retire at some point, and they're going to be getting health insurance, and you're going to be paying a portion of that, most often it's 50%, and you know that the average life expectancy is N number of years, you need to quantify how much that exposure is, what that liability is economically, and fund it. So you've got cities and towns that have, of our size, you've got communities that have $25 million OPEB liabilities. Here in the town of Townsend, it's one of 6 in the state that does not provide retiree health insurance. So our OPEB liability is negligible. It is nearly non-existent, which from a fiscal perspective is outstanding. From a recruitment and HR perspective, probably not as much. But we're still required by law to have the OPEB evaluation done. So that line has a little bit extra in the audit line for that.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that too.
You will see throughout the document as well references to COLA or COLA and STEP. COLA is cost of living adjustment. So just to talk about that kind of globally for the entire budget. The matrix or the pay grid that comes from the compensation and classification plan is built such that employees' positions get graded based on their level of responsibility and placed into the grid. The least responsible, people that can't cause us legal harm or cause anybody physical harm, are generally rated on the low end, and people that can do legal or physical damage, police particularly, are on the high end of the scale. I'm doing that backwards, I know, but that's how the sheet reads. Your position is then classified. You as a person in the job get placed into that grade, and there are multiple steps in the grade, and there's 2.5 percentage points between each step. The idea is you bring somebody in at the lower end of what is the range, and over time, if they're performing, they move a step in the grade. So that describes what the step means in that note. Additionally, when you pay a consultant like the town has with HRS to come in and do a comp and class plan, they take all of those positions and they gather data from comparable communities and they determine what the range of pay is in the universe of comparable communities for like positions. If you never adjust that grid, it goes stale pretty quickly, and then you've wasted your money because now you have a grid that's 5 or 6 years old and hasn't kept up with the inflation or what the universe of comps is doing. So at least every other year, you should consider, and your policy contemplates this, adjusting the entire grid by a cost of living. So what's being proposed is a 2% cost of living adjustment to the entire grid. You have some of the employees that are under union contract that have negotiated a 2%. So that'd be the COLA, and they are within a step system where they have a step available to them, so there would be a step as well. You've got others, like at the very bottom of the page, COLA and maximum step. So they're at the max, so they see the 2%. So just as you see COLA or COLA and step throughout the document, that is what it's referring to.
So that refers just to the non-union people?
Union as well. You'll have union contracts that have been negotiated that they've negotiated for 2%.
That's
so-
according to the contract?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep,
that's
absolutely.
fine.
Yep.
Mr. Kryler?
Yes, sir.
I'll try not to interrupt you because we have a lot to cover, but sometimes I try to act like which I will be very soon, thankfully, a citizen out there watching these things here. So COLA stands for cost of living adjustment. And when Mr. Crowder referred to maximum step in collective bargaining, what that would say is that different unions, if they'll, for so many years, they negotiate to get a step, but at some point after 7 or whatever it is, they max out, they don't get steps anymore. So I'm just, I find that when we just take a second or two to clarify things, it doesn't get into the world out there of make-believe.
And an additional point on that, Gordy, is if you don't adjust the grid by a COLA,
Right.
you get people eventually that reach that maximum step and they're stuck.
Absolutely.
So the cost of milk, the cost of gas goes up and they're stuck. So once people have hit that max step, if you don't adjust the grid, you've locked them out.
And that's what, and I don't want to get off the track here, but when I see something that the average citizen out there who's paying the bill here, I like to do my little mini, so it's not foreign language.
Absolutely.
And I've been here for a while, and I've learned for you and our great accountant treasurer out here and other staff members, the lingo, but it's hard if you're not doing it every day. So I'll try not to make any more questions so we can get out of here tonight, folks. I'm very tired, as you are. Thank you.
Next page, the next note you'll see is under treasurer collector. The second line in the budget, operating staff, there's an increase projected in there of 1 hour per week for the staff in the office, and that's in anticipation of additional duties related to the recommendation that came from our annual audit, specifically that some of the billing function in the water department be segregated, so there's a segregation of duties and be taken back up to the town hall. It may be, as Barbara said when she came before you to explain her budget, it may be that the water department decides that they don't want to do that. If that's the case, that money will sit and be able to be reprogrammed, or at the end of the year close to free cash. Barbara wanted to err on the side of caution and at least have it covered in case that does come to be.
I'm good with that.
Good. A lot of us were good with that.
Excellent. Under legal counsel, we've been trying to put a little bit extra to come up to the 5-year average. So each year we're creeping a little bit up. So this year we've seen it go from 43.5 up to 45. So it's relatively modest, $1,500, but just trying to keep picking away at it.
That sounds okay.
Yep. Then you get to management info. The note you'll see there is under professional services. The fee for Vadar, our financial software system, has been being covered by the MAS budget, but hadn't been accurately reflected in the budget apparently. So Bassam asked that it be clear that it's in this budget and that it be funded. So that's what you see there.
And what does that little note mean?
15K is the cost of the Vadar, so that's the software, and then 10K is PEG technical, so for technical support for the PEG access, because MIS currently, because we don't yet have a nonprofit corporation for the video, it comes under MIS budget, so that is if we need additional work on any of the PEG access stuff. Now, we're working with an attorney right now. You authorized the Cable Advisory Committee to work with a specialist that does cable work. So there are two parallel tracks. One is setting up the nonprofit, and the other is doing some of the infrastructure work that needs to be done, particularly down Vinton Pond area. So this would be, if in either of those cases we bump into the need for PEG access.
So while we're on that one, what's the timeline for when are those people going to get cable?
The document that I...
You mentioned it to me, but...
Were you on the board when the 10-year franchise license was renegotiated? I don't recall if you were or not.
I don't remember.
When the town renegotiated the 10-year license with Comcast,
Oh, yeah.
an amount of money gets put on the table for infrastructure work. They do not like to ever show that money as money to be used out on the street. Mm-hmm. They like it to be shown as for cameras and equipment. The Cable Advisory Committee and the Select Board at the time felt very strongly about getting money for that infrastructure work to get service down the Vinton Pond area. So while the franchise agreement says $130,000 is coming for technical assistance, there's a side letter that makes it clear that it's actually for that purpose. The side letter also says that you can't begin to go after that project until the second year, which we just hit last month.
Okay.
So we're at the point now where notice has been given to Comcast that that work needs to commence. The Cable Advisory Committee had been picking away at this over the last year and getting a little bit of pushback from Unitil saying the poles are Comcast saying they're Verizon's. The attorney said that's not your concern. You know, that's Comcast's issue. You give them notice under this side letter that the project is commenced, they've got to get it done. So we actually have a draft coming back. I received an email yesterday from the attorney. We have a draft coming back mid-next week of the letter that's going out that's going to lay out the timeline. So when I see that, I'll make certain to get it for you.
Yeah, it'd be nice to announce that at a meeting too, and let your friends on Vinton Pond know, because obviously they can't watch it, watch it on cable, so. But they've been anxiously awaiting for that, so that's good.
Next note that is, I think, up for discussion would be getting onto page 44 under Conservation Commission. You'll note the very first position, second position. That is the administrative support position. And you may remember that the commission came before you mid-year and asked to have an adjustment in the hours, an additional 5 hours for that support position. And you authorized that. And the expectation was that they were going to seek it in the budget for next year, and that's what this represents. It is accounting for that additional 5 hours per week.
Well, there's two lines there, so the first one is the other reclass that we
Correct.
talked about earlier. Okay,
Correct.
I'm good.
I'm good, thank you, Mr. Crowell. I'm going to page 45 now.
Actually, you're going to get all the way to 46.
Wow, I'm doing great.
46 at the bottom of the page is the police department budget. And you'll note that for the leadership positions, chief, deputy chief, and lieutenant, that they are carved out as individual positions, and their salary lines are all-inclusive, and the note says as much. So you will see a number that reflects base, education, if there were longevity, which is the case with one of the three, that's in there. So in large part, that's for retirement purposes. The trend has been over the last 5 or 10 years to have all compensation considered regular compensation. So for retirement purposes, it gets factored into your pension. So generally, as is always the case, the police chiefs and their legal counsel lead the charge on that. So this is as a result of that. Yeah. The last comment there, after the all-inclusive, is the school resource officer to be funded from revolving. You'll recall last year that...
So that's why it looks like a minus.
Correct. Yep. So last year, the school department funded $80,000 for a school resource officer, and the way it functioned in the very beginning when we had somebody on staff doing the job was that we had an officer that would work, and the school would pay us for that officer's time. The way we had done it last year was to actually budget the $80,000, and DOR didn't like how we were doing it. You remember we had a special town meeting, and the recommendation was to actually not have it as a part of the operating budget, but have it in a standalone revolving. So each of the lines that would have had a piece of the SRO will have the notation that says less SRO to be funded through revolving.
So that's making it look like that line has a 15% decrease.
Correct. When you get to the bottom of the police, it looks like a 0.3%, so a third of a percent decrease overall. That's driven largely by the fact that the SRO was pulled out.
So we just correctly have done our accounting with industry standards now, right?
Yep.
So we have to get re-educated that it is now correct the way that proper accounting and law is, we're lawful now.
To put it in a revolving.
Yes, so I mean, that's a good thing. It caused concerns, but it was unnecessary concern. The fact is that we're following the law now.
Right.
Is that layman's terms?
No, that's perfect.
All right, thank you.
The other point of note while we're talking about the SRO is that the school department's budget for 18, the fiscal year that we're currently in, had the SRO funded. The school department's initial budget proposal that they put out, you'll recall I came back and reported to you in February on the 20th that the SRO position was not funded in their initial draft.
Of the next year's budget.
Correct, for fiscal 19. I advised you that I had spoken about the position and advocated strongly that the position be funded. We had one member in particular on the school committee who also stood and advocated very strongly for the position. Subsequent to that first draft, a copy of which I have here, where the position was being reduced, the next meeting we went to, it was back in the budget. So I can appreciate how difficult it is to balance a budget, and particularly a $50 million budget, which is what the school is, all in. But I've got to give them credit for the fact that they recognize the value of funding that position. So,
And for this fiscal year, the year that we're in,
yes,
they had it
they
budgeted
did.
as
So,
well.
so it has always been, and if the budget is passed by the school committee the way it is currently structured, it would be funded next year as well.
Good.
They haven't finalized their budget yet, they haven't had the vote, but it's in the budget. To that point, we have actually been subsidizing that function out of our general budget since we have not had the SRO person that used to perform in that function. So the chief has had regular operational staff from the regular operational budget in the schools, going to evening events and the like. So the expectation is that that won't be the case long-term. There's a pretty extensive recruitment that's going on that the deputy chief has been coordinating that had us with roughly 70 applicants 3 Saturdays ago taking an exam in the fire department training room. So the process it's a very robust process, and we're getting very good play out in the field, interest from applicants. So the expectation is that that process will close up relatively soon, and we'll be able to give full consideration to how people get assigned, because right now we're down 2 spots, and we've had some folks out for extended periods of time for other reasons. So that's that piece.
Mr. Crowley?
Yes, sir.
I think because...
It's special town meeting, or annual town
Wait,
meeting.
hold on, I guess, because I can't recognize anyone. So are we having a meeting next week?
We're probably the week after.
We
All right,
can.
all right, so I'm going to keep with that. And could you meet with Mr. Kryler after? Nothing to do with you, Andrea, I'm sorry.
certainly.
But one thing I have demanded, and we now...
needed a clarification.
I know that, and he'll get, and I apologize for that, but here's the deal, is we now, when I'm the chairman, we have civility, and we're going to maintain that. And it has nothing, so I apologize, but unfortunately, it's the
No,
culture.
that's fine.
Thank you.
Fine.
Mr. Crowley, if you could, please meet with Ms. Wood when you have a
Absolutely
chance.
will.
Because I appreciate her decades of service to this town. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Go ahead, please, someone.
I was going to say, the next note, still in the police department, is the cruisers.
Yeah.
So you remember that the chief and the deputy chief came before you, and the proposal was from the chief and the deputy to lease a number of cruisers over a 3-year period. Traditionally, the town has purchased a cruiser or 2 every year or couple of years. The compromise right now that leaves both options open is what I've got before you here, which is a requested appropriation of $45,000. That would either buy 1 cruiser or be able to lease 3 with roughly $15,000 per car per year. So ultimately, this leaves the decision with you as a board, after the budget passes, what you authorize the police department to do, whether it's your perspective that they should purchase 1 or lease 3. This budget, as it reads, would allow either of those to take place, depending on what your wish is.
Any questions, Vanessa?
No, I'm just philosophically opposed to leasing. You know, I just don't think that, I think that if a vehicle's maintained, it has more of a life expectancy than a lease does.
And I have a little fleet management experience, but what I will tell you is that I'm always open to ideas. But I think that I like this idea that it allows down the road the future board to engage in a real work session and give them a chance to present it. because I think that whenever you change cultures or something like that, I personally like to close things out, but you have concerns. So I think whoever the next board is, am I incorrect that this will give them
I think
opportunity?
absolutely.
Yeah,
So I think
it's
that's a
kind of
perfect
like
settlement.
convince me.
Right. The only thing I had stated before is I won't be here for that, but I did make it crystal clear, and I hope the next boards would do it on far as public safety, but mostly officer safety, is that absolutely, I think it's foolish if we don't have GPS in those.
Absolutely.
All right, and I expressed that to the
agree.
chief with all due respect. It's 98% about, that where it's there or here or there, we know where they are all the time, and if there's, it's just unacceptable for not. So I know I'm going on, I won't be here, but I would plead with the new board to work with you and the chief and the deputy chief, that, to me, it's just as important as a ballistic vest, to be quite honest with you, because if you don't know where you are, we can't get you help. And I'll tell you a quick story, people think I have too many stories, but an officer who I trained, his name was Jack George, Tingsboro police officer. He is now dead. I trained a dog for him, and I helped him, and he was my friend. He was in a cruiser. He had a heart attack at a very young age of 50. He called for help. They sent the ambulances to the wrong place. If he had GPS, they would have been there to possibly save Jack George's life. And he was a Tingsboro officer, one of the most decent human beings in the world. So it is personal. As some of you know, I had a partner who was shot 6 times. So, you can think I'm running on here, but those funerals I don't want. I want them safe. So all I would ask, Chief, and to Sue, you'll be here, and to whoever else is sitting in these seats here, is that cruises, that's up to you people. I think Mr. Crowley, Chief, came up with a good idea. You can have that discussion, just appropriate the money now. And I think that's a lengthy discussion, to be honest with you, but that's fine. Give it a fair shot. But please, please, please have those GPSs in there, please, all right? And I'm sorry for taking time and oil, but you know what? It's from my heart that I say that, and, but as far as professional management, I think that's a good idea to let the next board decide where that money's going, so.
So, but I do have a question, because it was running like it was $38,000 the year before,
Correct.
and the requested was 65, and you changed that to 45. Am I reading that
You're
correctly?
reading it absolutely correctly. What the chief and the deputy chief were able to explain to me is what had traditionally been just being carried year to year at $38,000 was not enough to outfit a
That's right.
cruiser.
That's
They
right.
were having to cannibalize the outgoing car, and oftentimes it was incompatible equipment. So you ended up with different vehicles with different
So they were
equipment.
taking the police equipment out of the
old one.
old car and putting it in, but technology changes,
Right.
and that isn't always a good thing.
So you're really looking at about a $45,000 in order to purchase.
So you held it to the 45. Okay, thank you. I do have a question up above,
Yep.
What page are we on?
the same page.
47.
I'm just curious, on the police repair and maintenance on the building and equipment, those percentages just kind of sticking out to me. So are those earmarked for anything in particular?
Well, we do have the chief. I'm going to put him on the spot with that right now because I don't have my note with me to say what that increase is about. So we're dealing with a $3,000 increase in repair and maintenance of buildings and a $6,512 increase on repair and maintenance of equipment. Do you know, Chief, off the top of your head what those are about?
I don't know it in detail, I definitely went through that, but I know the building, there's conversations with Mark regarding that and estimating the needs of the building over the coming years.
I can get that for you, Sue.
Okay. At some point, can we start thinking about maintenance and repairs of assets? More in terms of a long-term capital plan, not just a financial capital plan, but a
Actual
real capital
maintenance, yeah.
plan.
We actually had a meeting in this room just last week, in large part on that subject. When you look at the document that Barbara put together for you that shows just our debt out over
Same kind of
30
thing.
years, we should have this companion document that has our assets listed. So we
Mm-hmm.
know that if a roof went on the building and it's got a 30-year lifespan, we know when we should be game planning for it.
Exactly, because it helps you to figure out what what's due for
Right.
a redo.
And you know,
I hope I'm not in my house when I have to have another roof.
a good example in real time that we're dealing with, and Joe talked about this at the FinCom last night. You've got the assessors that have a large plotter printer, and they've had to come in for a reserve fund transfer request because the thing is barely breathing, and it's needed. It's 18 years old. So
Is that in the budget?
it was done as a reserve fund transfer through the Finance Committee, so
Okay.
it's taken care of as a straight-up purchase.
Okay.
But Joe's point was, who, I don't mean to speak for you, Joe, but it was who has a printer and expects that it's going to be still kicking at 18 years?
Yeah, we have to do a better job of tracking our assets.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So next you'll see on the same page, 47, in the fire department budget, about 6 lines down, competitive ALS rates. The fire chief has come before the board for now the second year with the proposal to increase the rate that we pay our per diem paramedics. He is finding it difficult to fill shifts. He's finding it difficult to get people that are willing to come for the rates that we've been paying. So over the past 2 years, he's been making substantial moves to try to increase those rates. This is a $50,000 chunk. It should be known that that's also reflected in the revenue side of the document in the ambulance receipts. So the very revenue that comes in from the function is being used to offer the increase. His expectation, I think you'll recall when he came before you to talk about his budget, is that this is not a sustainable model. He knows that, and that there should be a discussion sooner than later about more full-time firefighters and being able to provide guaranteed coverage with full-time staff. I'm not certain the town of Townsend is there,
I'm not either.
but it's a discussion that I think needs to happen, because he's the professional. He's the guy that has the experience, and he's out there in the world doing this stuff. And something needs to be done to assure that as best we can, we are providing ALS coverage 24/7, because that's what we're called to do. So,
I'm good.
Oh, very good.
next, you'll see on page 48, reintroduced 10K maintenance expenses. This is another part of the discussion that I just referenced that we had last week in this room. When the facilities maintenance department was created in its current form,
Oh, yeah.
$14,000 was transferred from the fire budget to facilities, and with that, the fire department was able to wipe their hands and not have to worry about maintenance expenses. What wasn't really clear, apparently at the time, was that $14,000 didn't go into an expense line, it went into a salary line, which means there was no money that came into facilities budget to actually pay for the stuff. So right now, the way it works with the police department is they have money in their budget to pay for the stuff, and Mark does the work, or coordinates the work, or does the scope.
He supplies the labor.
Right. The brain power and the muscle. So this is proposing to do that with the fire department because it works well in the police. It also gives a sense of ownership. We also talked about the fact that it's easy to bump into the door twice and put a ding in it because you're not paying for it out of your own budget. If you're responsible out of your own budget, generally, as is the case with your home finances, if you got more skin in the game, you're a little bit more careful about it. So that's what that note is about. You are not going to see another note of,
Well, there's,
I'm okay on that, by the way.
I am too. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to talk to you ahead of time. Which we haven't done lately, but I thought it was a great practice when we brought department heads in here. I hope that the next boards continue that so people know them and what, all right. But when Mr. Hanks came in, he was actually he was being too efficient. Have we taken care of that? Where he took out too much money and he shouldn't have?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
That's all covered.
When someone's being honest and doing the extra thing, they should be penalized for it. So
Nope,
thank you for
nope,
taking care of
that's
it.
all squared away. The next note of note is on page 50, and you'll see that in emergency management. It's small money, but it's, I think, important to call it to your attention. The folks at TEMA generally have had next to nothing for a budget, and a lot of effort's been made to change that, to give them a home, which the side of the municipal garage is being remodeled to take TEMA. They have a lot of their equipment stored inside now, so that's ultimately going to be, in large part, their home. This budget provides for a cell phone, which surprised me to find that there wasn't a cell phone for TEMA. You've got somebody who's supposed to be coordinating things in the time of emergency who didn't have a town-provided phone. It also provides some money for training. Very minimal, but they've been doing the training and paying it out of their own pockets. And I think if we're going to treat them fairly, we should be covering those expenses. So again, it's short money. It's $1,300 and $800 respectively.
Not going to break the bank.
Not at all, but I think it's important to just call out the fact that they've been doing it on their own dime for
I
far
do
too
have a
long.
question on that phone.
Yep.
Is that town property?
It is. Town property, it's on the town plan, so like any
Okay.
other phone, it's
Consistent with what we pay for others?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Kryler, just one quick thing here, because, so their total budget for the year is $5,191. Is that
That's correct.
Now, I'm going to try not to get into too many editorials, but I won't, you won't have to listen to my editorials much longer. For $5,191, folks, all you have to do is watch the news and see the terrible things going on with families across the country. You know, where, and these people are just, for that kind of money, have done phenomenal. And one thing I was thinking about is, I've had family members, I'm sure many of you out there, who didn't have power in different communities for a week or two. Our seniors now can shelter in place, and that's due to Shirley and Tom and you, because we were told it couldn't happen, and at almost no cost to the taxpayers. You're seniors now, so when you're watching the news, you see that they're taking them to warming places and all that. In the little town of Townsend, they can stay warm in the house. That's a big feat for people with a $5,191 budget. So if you have to see those people, you know, it wouldn't hurt anyone to say thanks, all right? Especially if you have a senior that lives over there, your mother, your father, your uncle. Say thanks that while you're shoveling out and putting the wood stove in to stay for cold nights, that your seniors are safe because of these people. So I commend them. And I'm running on a little bit, but you know what? Some people need to be recognized in my final days here. And I'm very thankful that our seniors up there are protected, because you take care of your young and you take care of your seniors. So I'll try to get us out of here. I'm sorry, Mr. Crowder. Thank you. You're all set.
All right. Next page is where you'll see the next
51?
Correct. Next items of note, education. The notes are what they are. Those are the numbers that we have received to date. Nothing is final until the school committee votes it. But you see the 4.93% increase in the assessment for North Middlesex, and then the debt increase of a little over $500,000, which comes from the business manager. So those numbers, they're the best we have right now. I expect that they're going to hold, but until it's voted, we don't know. And you'll note that for the tech, that the assessment has gone down and the debt has gone down. So they've dropped by 11.4% on the assessment and 9.9% on the debt.
Wow.
So for about $130,000 reduction. So that helps a little bit.
On the North Middlesex debt, that's not, we haven't got the full hit for the high school
Not
yet.
No,
Until that project's finished.
correct.
Okay.
All right. Next, you have Highway Department, the first line. It shows a decrease of $16,272. Those that have been around the town government for a little bit of time, a decade or so, will recall likely that when Ed Kukula was the superintendent, he made the decision, and it was supported by the board at the time, to absorb the administrative responsibility that had been being done by a part-time clerk, and for that, he received the compensation. What this budget contemplates is breaking that back apart, and the superintendent gets the rate that Ed would have been getting had Ed stayed and had Ed not taken on the responsibilities of the administrator. And then the delta appears down below in the highway support staff line, which is reestablish admin position at 17 hours per week.
So we're minusing 16,272, and we're plussing the 16,893.
Correct.
Plus benefits.
No, it's only 17 hours a week.
So they don't get any
So they won't,
benefits?
I mean, they'll get vacation, pro rata vacation and sick and the like, but not health.
Okay.
And the line in the middle reads one laborer and one truck driver in place of one operator. The position that Jim Smith held as an operator has been reprogrammed at his request to be two people. Two people at lesser level of responsibility in the pay grid, but two live bodies to be able to spread the work around. So you have the laborer and truck driver in place of an operator.
Okay.
Next one, contract, page 52, COLAs and steps and contract. 53, the same. 54 is where you'll see your next notes. In the library budget, it's something that you spent a great deal of time talking with the library trustees about, and they spent an equal amount of time with the finance committee. But the director line, the note reads COLA and step and increase from 37.5 to 40 hours for the director. The same logic holds true there. Stacy works more than 37.5 hours. The next line is COLA and step and increasing the children's librarian from 37 to 40. Same story.
Okay. So the same thing as here, really.
Same thing as the accountant, correct?
Okay.
Questions on that one?
Already been explained to us, thank you, at least to me.
Yep. The next note is on page 55, near the bottom. The note says, the debt detail is less water and education. So just so people are aware, that $507,000 figure of debt doesn't include the water department debt, because that's paid out of the enterprise fund, so it shows in their budget. And it doesn't include the education debt, because as we just saw on the page ago, that is up in the education line beneath each operational assessment. Then you get to page 56, health insurance. You'll see a significant reduction over the last 2 years. Each year, last year the reduction was because the employee groups at the collective bargaining table were, I think, fair and understood the reasonableness of changing the percentage split between what the town pays and what the employee pays. It's most common to find 70-30. We were 85-15. 85% paid by the town, 15 by the employee. Through collective bargaining, we were able to change that to 75-25 last year, so that resulted in a significant savings. This most recent budget drops yet again because we've got plan design changes. Anybody that's in the private sector and has health insurance would likely take a look at the benefit plan that's offered in governments generally and be surprised, because they're generally rich plans. Low deductibles, low co-pays, $1 coverage in some places. So in recognition of that, yet again, I think there's been a reasonableness at the table, and we're looking at getting to a GIC benchmark type of plan. So not the GIC, which is the Group Insurance Commission, the state insurance. There's no interest in going to that, and I think that I would support the employees in that decision, because if you go to the GIC, any 6-month window, they can change the plan, they can change the rate, they can change the co-pays,
Which is
deductibles.
why the schools are having a difficult time. Right.
And then you have the fact that just 6 months ago, the GIC announced that they're jettisoning Fallon, Harvard Pilgrim, and Tufts. And there are no longer any Massachusetts-based plans being offered. There are plans out of the Midwest. So I think people in Townsend and in a lot of towns are very particular about their health care, in lots of cases more so than their rate of pay. Health insurance is very important. So the fact that I think they were reasonable at the table and recognized that something had to give is worthy of note.
So the plan that the employees would be looking at now, is it one plan, or do they have a choice
It would
of?
be two plans. By law, we have to offer two plans. We have to offer an HMO, and it used to be called an indemnity plan. It's a PPO now. So we have for probably, I don't know, probably 20 years had an HMO and a PPO. Right now, we have, I think, three subscribers on the PPO or four?
3 family, 1 single.
Yeah, so we have 4 subscribers on the PPO. And it's surprising because they pay more for the same, nearly identical benefit level as the HMO.
The big difference
But they-
is one HMOs need referrals,
Yes,
but it's all the same documented groups.
yeah, that's because a lot of people prefer to be able to go wherever they want without their doctor having
Without the
to,
referral.
yeah. And you pay for it.
Sure.
You pay more for it, but, did the deductibles change? Deductibles, co-pays?
We don't currently have a deductible, and the new plan, at least for this
That's
next...
very nice.
At least for the next year, it won't either. All bets are off for the out years, but the move from $15 copays or $10 copays and $50 ER copays, which is where we've been, will be to see the imposition of $150 copay for outpatient surgery or $250 for inpatient surgery, where there have been none before. ER going from 50 to 100. Those are things that a lot of other plans did a decade ago. I think Townsend's hung on longer than most in terms of being able to afford to provide that benefit. But it's still $1 coverage, so there are no deductibles to be met before the insurance kicks in. I don't know that that'll last long either.
We also kept the co-pays, and a lot of them are going much higher in the co-pays.
Blue sky.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a lot of companies out there that offer a, very high deductible,
Skinny plan.
yeah, so that, what you're doing with insurance is gambling that nothing's going to happen, and as long as you have money in your pocket to pay for something that does,
The difficult thing with
then your
offering,
premium is lower, but it depends on which way you look at insurance.
the difficulty with offering a skinny plan is you'll generally be peeling off a good portion of your younger, more
That's right.
risk-open subscriber base, and that takes money out of the pool in those other groups. So it becomes a numbers game.
Mr. Crowley?
Thank you.
Yes,
Just a
sir.
couple, I thought I was going to do this, but whatever. You can recall it, you don't like it. But the truth is, could you just answer this for me, please? In municipal government, is a very common practice for municipalities to have to hire private companies who make a living out of advising how to handle our insurance needs.
Oh, yeah.
Very commonplace. Matter of fact, one man was Mr. Pecos, has a booming company. He goes, municipalities pay a large amount of money to do that. And the second thing is, when we started the collective bargaining to address our non-sustainable healthcare costs, town council sort of said, you might need special counsel to how to handle this. Is that correct? Okay. So you're not going to want me to say this, but I'm going to say this. They told us it couldn't be done. Your health insurance is still like one of the best for our employees in town, anywhere around, and we cut $200,000. And people might not want to hear it. It's due to one person, the guy sitting to my left, all right? I just sat over there and followed it by the nose, followed the lead, and enabled him to do his job. So most towns have to hire private human resources lawyers to save. No one's cutting their health insurance costs. One reason now that we're not maybe laying off people is because of the skills of James Kryler. That's a fact, that's the truth, and the evidence proves that. So I will say, thank you, Mr. Kryler. I know you don't like me to do this, but the fact is, everyone out there, is anyone else's health cost got $200,000? No. So thank you, Mr. Kryler. And I'll try not to break my word and do it again, all right? Thank you.
The final piece of that is the employees will receive a reduction, is it 2.95% reduction in their premium cost. So I mean, the benefit level has been trimmed, obviously, but the premium's gone down to boot.
Well, it's a good thing you didn't say that to me before I went on a rant, because I really would have said, all right. Thank you.
And I appreciate those words, Gordy.
It's the truth.
I
The
truly
truth
do.
is easy. You're welcome.
Oh, but again, you have to do things at the table in a collective bargaining environment, and if there's not reasonableness on both sides of the table,
Couldn't be more. Our employees couldn't have been, they care about the town.
Yeah, they do.
You know, and thank you for bringing that up. We're almost all done with all, but the ones who settled with us, they demonstrated that they want to work here and they care about this town. So to those people, they deserve everything they get more. So thank you to the town employees.
Okay, and the only other remaining note is that the general property liability and vehicle insurance is a plug number in there of 4.8% increase, $11,482. We're likely not going to need all of that, but we'll get our workers' comp audit after the budget has been finalized. And I look back and I see that we've been caught a couple times without having funds sufficient in that line when that comes through and you have to do supplemental appropriations. So this will allow us to cover what, on the I think, the most conservative way, what we could expect after the workers' comp audit. There's a little bit of an increase in the property liability, not because the rates have gone up, because you may remember that you agreed last year to a 3-year rate hold with the company that we use. But we brought new buildings on and some new vehicles. So that's why there's an increase on the rate side. And with that, you end up with a proposed budget of $317,465. It's a $1,132,257 increase, 5.3%. Back in the beginning of the document here, there's some narrative that talks about that. If you look at the roughly $1 million increase in education costs based on debt, which everybody's voted for, so it's not being done to us, and the increase on the education assessment, that $1 million takes up roughly 90% of the increase in this budget. If you shed that just to see what the rest of the general government increases, it's about $236,000, or just around 1%. So you're seeing, I think, Sue, you used the word lean a little while ago. This is a 1% very lean budget. But it's meeting the level of service that's currently being provided, and in very subtle ways, providing a little bit more. So that is the draft.
It does concern me going forward, because you can't sustain things forever with that kind of a lean budget, but,
Do you want to talk about the debt for a second?
yes, especially the West Townsend Fire Station.
People, again, may or may not have followed along with how this all went down, but the town had some debt exclusion on the books, some projects that had been previously approved, which is an amount of money that we're allowed to raise in taxes above the limits of Prop 2.5. So we're able to raise the money to pay that bill. Once that bill is paid off, that increase in taxes disappears, and you're back down to that base level.
And it does not accrue a percentage increase like the
Correct.
base budget does.
Correct. So when the West Townsend Station, the timing is interesting of when the West Townsend Station was being discussed and voted, it was expected that the debt would be coming due on or about fiscal 19. If you look at the debt chart, again, to Barb's credit, this debt chart, and there are some easier versions to follow that are not nearly as detailed in the book, you'll note that an amount of debt exclusion debt is falling off next year because we're making the final payment this year. It's about 140, Barb, 146? 148,252. We're actually paying off this year in debt exclusion. When the West Townsend Station was authorized, the town authorized borrowing for it, but didn't take the companion step to make it a debt exclusion. So we've had to fund the debt for the fire station within the operating budget, within the confines of Prop 2.5. Interestingly, the number for the debt service for the West Townsend Station, Barb, is
148,856.
within pennies.
$600 difference.
So from an outsider, which I am in that regard because I wasn't here when that decision was made and those votes were taken, it looks like the logic had been, we know we're going to time this such that when the bill comes due for the fire station, we're going to have created this room within the debt exclusion because we're going to have dropped off that prior debt and it would slide right in and the impact would not be felt because you would have been accustomed to having that in the rate all
Right,
along.
nothing would go up, but nothing would go down either.
Correct. So some of the discussion Sue and I have been having is if that had been the intent, should it be something that's revisited? And when Sue makes the comment appropriately about this being a lean budget and whether it's sustainable long-term or not, having $180-something thousand inside of this operating budget for the debt service for that station is a difficult nut to swallow. That's a big chunk of money. If that wasn't inside the operating budget and instead was out in debt exclusion, we would have the ability to leave $200,000 roughly as available, unauthorized raise and appropriate, or available money to be taxed that we don't tax, we let sit there for future. The mechanics of it are interesting. I had always believed that once a project had been authorized and not authorized as debt excluded, that you had to go back and do both pieces again. You had to go to a town meeting and get a vote to debt exclude it, and then to the ballot box. Barb did the research, and she comes back with the ruling from DOR that because it's already been authorized to be borrowed at town meeting, all that would be required to make the switch to debt exclusion would be a vote at the ballot box.
And I think what we need to try to have a way to explain simply is, I mean, this is great, this is a great worksheet, but we need to try to demonstrate it as simple as we can too, because the taxpayer's gonna wanna know, how's this hitting my pocketbook? And what is the difference if I have it up here or down there? Now, it's a wash, basically, in terms of how it hits the pocketbook.
taxpayer, it's a wash.
To the taxpayer. However, going forward where general government is concerned, especially with the limitation of 2.5, taking that money out of the operating budget and separating it out means that we have some ability to put some money aside if we need to for IT overage or whatever, okay? In raise and appropriate if we absolutely needed to, or simply have it in there and let it default to cash afterward. So, I mean, I think that it's better for us to pull it out. And there's another reason too. The reason I think I've voted for, and we have not done overrides in as long as I can remember, but debt exclusions, is because we're saying, yeah, we'll pay for this amount of money over the next 10 years or 20 years. However, I don't want my 2.5 base to increase using that money. I want that to stay the same, because I want a conscious decision if I want to increase the 2.5%. So it's almost like when you vote to approve the funds, you're also saying, hey, wait a minute, my intention is to vote for this to be excluded debt. Don't count it so that it ends up getting 2.5% every year off of it that I'm allowed to raise my taxes on. So I think it's a choice that people have, but I am concerned about going forward after this year with that in there.
If you,
And what does that do to our levy limit, too, for next year? If we take that out of there, okay, and we exclude it, what happens to our levy limit? This year would be decreased, 19 would then be decreased.
If you're pulling it out and putting it in as a debt exclusion.
If I put it in, if I'm pulling it out and putting it as a debt exclusion, and I'm trying to compute my levy limit for for 20, what's it gonna be? Is it gonna be decreased if I don't spend that money?
No, it doesn't decrease, it's just not all being used.
Right.
Okay, that's right, because it's in there anyway.
it's like a credit limit.
It's a
Yeah.
credit.
So you have that.
Okay.
Those
So it's
savings
money that we would have if we needed it.
You'd be
Especially when
authorized
it
to have it
comes
there.
time for fall town meeting, if other expenses come up.
Or if it's 180 grand and the IT grant is 200, there's a, there's a,
I'm more concerned about the grant coming, hopefully the grant coming in at the 200, and maybe it costing us another 30,000 on top of it.
just for illustration, on page 58, you don't need to go there now, but this is the revenue projection sheet. The very first section is tax levy.
Oh, yeah, that's a good thing, too.
And to your point about the debt exclusions not growing, the number that gets hit by the 2.5% multiplier, you'll see that if you look in the 2019 recommended column, you'll see the prior year levy limit was $16,074,514.
Where am I, Jim?
Second column in
Okay.
on page 58.
Yep.
The 2.5% is $401,863. We have no override, so that's blank there. New growth is
That
$133,924.
all gets added on.
That gets added up, that gives us our new levy limit total of $16,610,301. Beneath that, you see the debt exclusions getting added, which then gives us our maximum allowable levy. But when we start next year.
That's the ceiling.
Right, when we start next year, we're not using that bottom number that has the debt exclusions built in. We're using the levy limit, which is just the prior year base.
17,
Correct.
right, right.
Barb, did you want to speak briefly about the impacts that the West Townsend station would have on an average $250,000 home?
25 cents. If we, with the other debt coming off, it's $44 coming off, and if we exclude the new West Townsend fire station, it'd be $44.25 coming on. So it'd be 25 cents on a $250,000 home
Difference.
difference on your tax bill.
Most people can afford 25 cents.
So we're proposing just to exclude the West Townsend fire station, not the other.
Not the
pumper.
pumper.
Yeah. The total new debt is 181,000 and change, that's inside of our operating budget. We're proposing just to exclude the fire station.
Vicki, what's the downside?
To what?
Any ideas, what's the downside? I mean, I want people to know, it's not just financial, what does this mean?
Well, to be honest, when I first heard about them changing over the debt exclusion as a taxpayer, I didn't think it was a great idea. But when Barbara went through and showed how small of a difference it's going to make, it does give us more wiggle room in the operating budget.
Yeah, see, it's awfully tight. The budget is awfully tight right now. I would feel so much more comfortable if we had a little bit of
It's my recommendation.
unspent money.
Sure. I mean, the other negative, just to be fair, is that when we pitch projects as debt exclusions, part of the story we tell is that when the debt is paid off, the tax rate's going to go down. So we just need to be cognizant of the fact that what we're proposing is that in this case, it won't go down. We're going to slide something else into its place. But ultimately, it's the vote of the town and inside the ballot box when no one sees what you're doing, so you get, the purest sense of what people want at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Jim, will you be able to have like an information night before that? Because I think if it's explained properly.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's the decision of the select board to put it on a ballot. If a decision is made to put it on the ballot, then we go through that process, absolutely.
When do we have to do that? Do we have to do that for this election?
We're closed. I mean, you voted,
what I
you
thought,
voted
yeah.
to sign the election warrant last week, so it'd be whenever our next
So just
election might be.
like typical after town meeting,
Sure.
of how many weeks afterward would look for approval? If not, it goes back into the operating budget as it is now. So it's really like, do you want to exclude it so that 2.5 is not accrued on it is one thing, and so that we have some money where we don't have to be so tightly budgeted. And if not, that goes back into the general fund and to free cash anyway, so, which might be a good thing considering that the high school's gonna end up hitting fully in a few months. So that might be able to, we might be able to offset some of that if we have a good free cash year. I do have one other question.
Sure.
State aid, the state aid number that you have in there currently?
Yes. It is the governor's budget called House 1, which is weird.
Yeah, I know.
But you mentioned earlier, it depends on what year it is and how
Exactly.
your state aid hits. Generally, in an election year, you see the governor put a number out, and then the House and the Senate not want to be outdone by the governor, so they add a little bit on top of it. We are in an election year where that, if the pattern holds true, we would see an increase in state aid.
Okay, so we've got a potential upside when the House and the Senate and the conference committee end up finalizing things. That'll be well past town meeting.
Absolutely.
But at least we know that, this is like worst-case scenario. Governor's budget is usually worst-case scenario. So,
Yeah, we're sitting with a 3.5% increase in state aid.
and I was also thinking of it in terms of the school assessment, because traditionally, in an election year, they come in with some extra aid for the schools
Sure.
as well. So that may reduce something on that assessment side. So we may end up looking a little bit better coming into the fall.
Sure.
Good job, Jim, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Again, to folks in the audience or at home, if it's not in total online right now, I think it is. If it's not, it will be first thing.
It would be great to have her worksheets up there.
Oh, absolutely,
too.
we'll get the whole show up.
Yeah. Thank you for
Anybody has any-
that, very nice.
If anybody has any questions, members of the board, members of the audience, members of the finance committee, I've been trying to get to each of your meetings over the last couple of months. But even off meeting time, any questions about any of the stuff we've been going over, I'd love to get the call and be able to address it sooner than later, so,
Good job, thank you.
thank you.
Sorry that we had to let you wait so long. Well, it just seems like we've been trying to
Oh, I know.
to do it for a while. I know you've been anxious to get it settled.
Mr. Kryler,
Yes, sir.
do you need anything from the board tonight?
Negative.
Okay. So I guess we'll be ready to close here in a second. Just a couple quick things here. I think I'd be remiss, I look around the room here, if on behalf of the people in the town, that we took a opportunity to thank, I see members of the finance committee and the ones who aren't here, we sometimes forget that they're volunteers and that this town wouldn't run without so many volunteers. So to the ones here and to the ones that aren't here, the finance committee, I would personally like to thank you for all your hard work. And to my fellow board members, Cindy, who's sick tonight, I hope you feel better, and to Sue. I know you both invested greatly into this process, and I think it's a piece of work to be proud of. To all our department heads, I think under the leadership of Jim and with direction from the board, you all, in tough times, did a spectacular job to give the best service while being fiscally responsible. Mr. Crowley, I look in the back here, and not to embarrass them, but I see 4 public employees that I'm extremely proud of. and the 3 to the left, is we are functioning. I feel good about how our money's being handled, and that has, and how we determine that. And you 3 there deserve thanks and credit, and I actually, when I leave here, feel better that we know where our money is and it's handled and the best practices thanks to you 3. It's not to eliminate the chief, but he has enough shine stars all the time. But I just want to thank you, but what I'm leading to is to thank you. But the other is, Mr. Crowley, I've been after you lately to get things done. How are we doing on recognizing great public employees? Are we supposed to be having that on the agenda soon for the awards?
We are, and,
We should be talking about it Tuesday, right?
yep, Tuesday,
That's all.
as of now, I've received 2 nominations from just one member of the board.
Okay.
So,
All right, well, maybe we could get them to do that. And your eval, now that all the members of the board have finished that, that'll be Tuesday too?
That'll be on Tuesday as well,
All right.
correct.
Sorry, but you'll be taking this microphone away from me next week, so I'm gonna get all the mileage I can out of it. So I guess, are we done, Sue?
Yes,
Thank
move
you
to
for your hard
adjourn.
work and a nice, pleasant meeting. So I would take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn at,
that's an hour off.
okay.
8:01.
8:01, how's that?
Second, motion's been made to adjourn. All in favor?